Hi, in this video we will set up the Visual Basic Editor for an efficient work style. We will talk about its most important windows and how to organize them for creating the best workspace. We are also going to talk about the essential knowledge of how the VBA code works, what are macros and modules, and how to use mathematical operators. So, let's get started. Let's open our first workbook, which will be the starting point. Okay, now your Excel ribbon should look pretty much like this, and as we plan to work with VBA quite often, it is good to add the Developer tab to this ribbon. To display this tab, right-click any ribbon control, for example Home, and then select Customize the ribbon. In this list, we place a check mark next to the Developer. Okay, here we have our new Developer tab. Now let's open the VBA Editor, which is the workspace for creating VBA code. We can do it by clicking this button in our new Developer tab, or by using the shortcut Alt F11. I will use the shortcut. Okay, this is the VBA Editor with my standard layout in which I always work. Quite likely it will look slightly different in your case, but that's no problem as we are going to learn how to customize the VBA Editor. Look, all these helping windows can be closed. To add them back again, click the View tab, and here you can select the needed windows. Most of the time you will work with these. Let's recreate the workspace layout which I had. So first of all we need the Project Explorer, then the Properties window, the Watch window, as well as the Immediate window. The position and size of all these helping windows can be changed. Just take and drag it where you want it to be, even something like this, and adjust the size. Furthermore, there are these helping toolbars. To add or hide some of them, right-click the standard VBA ribbon and place the check marks next to the desired toolbars. I normally use these two, like this. Just as in the case of the helping windows, you can move these toolbars to the positions you need. Okay. This is my personal favorite layout of the VBA workspace. You can start working with this layout, and then later, if needed, you can adjust it according to your own wishes and requirements. In the framework of this course, we will learn the functionality of all these windows and how to use them. Now we can talk about what macros are and how the VBA code works. I always like to make some easy to understand comparisons and examples, and that's what we are going to do with you right now. We can imagine VBA as a super efficient coworker that can perform thousands of actions and operations in Excel and many other programs within milliseconds. To perform a task, VBA should get written instructions from us, and as a very reliable and hard-working coworker, it will follow any of these instructions and take the according actions. If the instructions are well formulated and logically structured, you can be sure that the work will be done in the highest quality level. However, if you don't formulate what you need in the correct way, or if there is a logical error in your commands, then our diligent worker will inevitably fail. These instructions can be thought of as to-do lists, in which we write the actions to be taken in the order that we need. The cool thing about it all is that we can make, for example, 10 different to-do lists for 10 repetitive tasks of our everyday work. So when the time comes and we need some help from our super efficient coworker, we just give him the to-do list of a task that has to be performed, and he works his way through this. Yes, that is how we can approximately think of it all. And what does it mean for us? It means that we have to learn the VBA programming language to be able to write these to-do lists for our imaginary super efficient coworker. And we also have to learn the basic constructs of VBA syntax, like writing conditions, loops, and so on, so that we can create strong and complex algorithms in our to-do lists. Okay, now we know that VBA expects these to-do lists from us. So where do we write and store them? Let's find it out. Remember we said that for our 10 repetitive tasks, we can write 10 to-do lists. Well, these to-do lists are the macros, which are also called subroutines. The subroutines have to be placed in a module. You can think of it as writing multiple to-do lists for a worker and placing them in a folder. However, in VBA we have different types of modules. There are standard modules, UserForm modules, workbook and worksheet modules, as well as class modules. When you are writing a general macro, you normally place it in a standard module. UserForm modules store procedures, including event-triggered procedures, for working with user forms like this one. User forms are customizable forms that allow us to interact with the end user of the program for getting information from them and so on. And macros for programming such user forms should be stored as set in the UserForm modules. And it's just the same idea with the workbook and worksheet modules. Here are stored macros that work with workbooks and specific worksheets based on events and so on. We will take a detailed look at this type of modules in a later tutorial. And finally, there are also class modules. These are a more advanced VBA topic to which we will get back later after getting the required basic skills and knowledge. Well, let's write our first to-do list for our imaginary worker, or speaking in the correct way, let's write our first macro. To do this, we first have to create a standard module, so let's add it. We have to click the Insert tab and then Module. You can add as many standard modules as you want to organize your macros in the way you need. Let's write our first examples in the module 1. To delete a module, right-click it and select Remove. Here you can also see the worksheet and workbook modules. As already said, we will talk about them in a later video. Okay, now we selected our first module. As you can see in the Properties window, there is only one property of a module. It is its name. And that's where we can rename our modules. Let's change the name of this one to something like that. Perfect. And as you noticed, when we added the first module, the following window opened. Well, this is the code writing area in which we are going to write our macros. Let's write the first one. To create a standard macro, we have to write sub, which means subroutine, and then we have to give it a unique name. Okay, press enter. And VBA automatically added these brackets and closed our macro with the phrase and sub. All the actions that have to be taken in this macro should be written between these two lines. That's how we created our first macro in VBA, though it still has no commands in it. In our story with a super efficient coworker, this is now one of the 10 to-do lists. So how will VBA in future proceed here and work with the written code? Well, it will read the code line by line and perform the requested actions. Later we will also learn such VBA constructs like conditional if construct and loops, which will allow us to create interesting algorithms in our macros. And as you can guess, in our modules we can write as many macros as we need, just as in the example with the 10 to-do lists. So we are getting closer to our practical part of this video, where we will learn and train how to use mathematical operators in VBA. But before we start with that part, we have just a few more important points to be discussed. The first one is the question how to save an Excel file with macros. Let's first close the VB editor, and when you have written your code, click the File tab and then Save As. Alternatively, you can just click F12 on Windows to open the Save As window. Here you can select the place where you want your file to be saved, and then comes the important part. You have to select Excel macro enabled workbook in the field Save As type. It's important because otherwise all the code will be lost. The second important point is a little information about how the Project Explorer works. We already have seen that here are shown all the modules of our workbook. If I now open another one, again a new one, I will use the shortcut Ctrl-N. Here we have our second workbook. We go again to VB editor, and here we can see the new added workbook. Just as in the case with the first one, it now has only these two standard modules. To add a new module in the second Excel file, we should first select one of its available modules and then go again to Insert and Module. Here, as you can see, this new module was added in the second workbook. To go back to our first macro, which we already started writing, we have to first of all select the right module. It was this one, and here is our macro. Okay, that was the second point that I also wanted to show you before starting the practical part of this video. Now we will learn how to use mathematical operators in VBA. Also, we will take a look at how to display something in a message box. So this is the list of mathematical operators in VBA. Most of the time you will use the following operators, and that's why we will train them today. Let's do it in our first macro, which we already started writing. I will also close the second workbook so that it doesn't distract us. And to have some visual effects of VBA working with the code, we will use the command msgbox. This command allows us to display some text in a message box. In this video, we are going to learn how to work with numbers and mathematical operators, and that's why by now we will deal only with numeric values. Then, in the next video, we will take a look at how to work with string values, or in other words, text values. So after we wrote the command, we can write what we want to be displayed in the message box. Take a look. If I write now 5, then that's what will be shown in our message box. To run the macro, we click this button here, or we can press the F5 button. VBA will run the macro in which your cursor is currently placed. If you place it outside of our macro or any other macros, then VBA will first ask us which macro we want to run. Let's run it in this way, so just click Run, and as you can see, message box shows us what we have written in the code. Now, if I change the number to something like 10, it will be accordingly changed in our message box. Now let's already train the first mathematical operators. If we write 5 plus 5, then VBA will calculate this whole part and it will display a 10, as it is the result of our calculations. So I press F5 again, and VBA displays the message box with the calculated value. Now let's try out the multiplication. In the second line, it means that this will be the second action or the second command in our macro. I will write again MSG box, and then 5 multiplied by 2. It means we will get now 2 message boxes. I run the macro, and here we see it. VBA first displays the result of the first calculation, then we press OK, and the result of the second calculation is displayed after this one. So as said, these were the 2 commands written in 2 lines, and VBA executed them line by line. You can also use brackets to define the order of calculation. For example, let's first delete the second line, and now in our first line, let's change the command to something like that. In this case, we will get a 15, as VBA will first multiply 5 by 2 and then add a 5 to this number, which will give us a total of 15. But if we change it now by adding brackets like this, then we get a 20, as 5 plus 5 gives a 10, and then the 10 is multiplied by 2. And so on. Just try out these different operators and train them a little bit. Before we start with the task, I have to show you how you can write values to a cell in a workbook. We can do it like this. I will create a new macro, write range, then open the brackets, and the address you need should be enclosed within double quotes. For example, the cell A1, and so we write its address. Normally you have to specify the exact path to the cell by specifying the workbook first, then the worksheet, and only after that all, you tell what cell is needed. However, we will take a detailed look at the explicit cell referencing in one of our next video tutorials. By now we will use this short variant for our first exercise. So we wrote range A1, and now we can put the equals sign and write the value that should be written in the cell. For example, 100. Let's now run the macro. I press F5, and as you can see, the macro wrote 100 to this cell. As we already have seen how to use mathematical operators, we can change the way of writing 100. Let's write a second command for that. Let's first delete the content from our cell A1, and now run the code again. And the 2 numbers were written in these 2 cells. Again, as you can see, we wrote 2 different commands. Till now, we always pressed F5 to make VBA execute the whole code all at once. However, by pressing F8, we can single step through the code, seeing the result of each separate line. This command is called Step and 2, and it is available in the debug toolbar. So you can click this button here or press F8. So let's write the third command in our second macro. Again, let's clear these values so that we can see the steps. And now I will press F8. As you can see, VBA indicates which line will be executed next. So I press F8 one more time and again, and here was our first command executed. Now I press just till the end of the macro, so the macro is fully executed, and as you can see, the values were written to the cells that we needed. That's how you can go through your macro to better understand it and analyze it. This possibility to step into your macro is very important, especially in the cases where you work with more complex macros. And one more thing I want to show you in this video is how to comment the code. A comment in our macro is a piece of text which will be not executed by VBA. With comments, you can write notes and other information about your code for yourself or your coworkers. To let VBA know that you want to write a comment, precede the text with an apostrophe. VBA changes the color of this part of the code and it will not programmatically execute it. Comments can be placed like this or like that. Sometimes you don't want to delete some code or its part, but you need VBA to skip it and not execute it. That's where you can use commenting too. To do so, just write an apostrophe in the front of the line that has to be ignored by VBA, just like that. When you need to comment multiple lines, this toolbar comes in handy. Just select the part that has to be commented and click Comment Block. Later, when you need this code again, just select again the whole part that you need. You can also select it like that, not the full text, and click the button Uncomment Block. This is especially useful when you have a very long code. Okay, and the last thing before we start with the practical exercise. Let's change one VBA setting. Sometimes when you will write your code, you will need to copy and paste something in the line you are currently writing. Let me show you an example. Let's imagine that we need to write the result of this calculation to this cell. And you can copy this calculation code from some other part of your code. So you write range C1 as an example here again, then you write equals sign, and then you want to go and copy this part, and here comes the warning that there is some error with this line. When you will write complex programs in VBA, that will only distract you. So in this ribbon, click Tools, and then Options. Here we have to uncheck the Auto Syntax check. Click OK. Now let's try again. I will delete the equal sign just for seeing that it now is not red. Then I put equal sign again, go to this part of the code to copy, and as you can see, VBA doesn't distract us with such warning, but it still highlights the wrong lines with red color. Okay, and now we can just copy and paste the part of the code and, for example, run the macro. Okay, finally we can start with our first practical exercise. You can download this workbook under the link in the description of this video. So as you can see, we have some calculations in this table. Let's imagine that due to some reasons, values from some positions are gone lost. That's why your task will be to write the values back into the cells with help of VBA. That's what you will have to write. So you can start. As already said, you can download this file in the description. I will start now a 5 seconds musical pause, and you can pause this video too. After you are done with the exercise, you can continue watching this video again to see one of the possible solutions. Okay, welcome back to our tutorial, and I hope you could successfully do the exercise. Here is one of the possible solutions, but you can still do some of the calculations in some other way. Okay, perfect. That was our first tutorial. In the next video, we will talk about data types and variables in VBA. See you in the next video. Goodbye.